What's up guys, this is Wences. Welcome back to my channel where we talk about creating an epic life on your terms. And today we're going a little bit lighthearted. So a lot of you have been asking me, how do I know if I'm an INFJ? And I haven't done videos like this for a while, but I thought, now why not? Let's just jump into it and I'm gonna tell you how I approached it, how I found out I was an INFJ, and the best way I recommend you finding out. Before we get started, remember if you want to take the next step in creating your epic life, then join the boot camp or work with me privately, all the information you find below. So the first thing, and I think this is very important to understand, is that MBTI is a toolbox. It's not something that you are, it's not something that you should define yourself by. It's a box we can put ourselves in. It's a system that'll help us to narrow down who we are and what we want. Not all of us are the same. Just because somebody is an INFJ doesn't mean that that person is exactly like the next INFJ. It's just not the case. But it's extremely helpful when you're going through your personal development journey and you want to find out who you are, you're lost, you don't know your direction. I have found MBTI extremely helpful. I went from a direction of first finding out, okay, I'm highly sensitive, then I found out I was an empath, and then I found out about MBTI and that I was an INFJ, and my world just opened up. It helped me so much, and I'm so happy that we have this community because we can help each other through that. But remember, it's a tool, it's something that narrows down all the options you have about your life. And because it narrows it down, it helps you to make the right decisions because we're not so overwhelmed by all the choices. It's a system. So the first thing I did and the first thing I would recommend you do is to take the test. There are a lot of tests online. I haven't really looked them up in a while. I think there are around 60 or 80 questions you can take. And I got even MBTI certified. So I was talking to somebody who was certified and he pretty much asked me the same questions. I don't think that they're much different than the ones you can find online, but please don't quote me on this. It was years ago and it might be different. But this kind of test gives you a first indication. And remember, it's just an indication, nothing more. In most of those tests, you have something like 60% INFJ and 40% INFP, for example. And INFJs and INFPs are so completely different. And so if you first look at something like this, it doesn't give you much of an insight. And I remember in the beginning, I had more often than not INFP more percentages than INFJ and other personality types as well. So it is an indication. And remember, it's so subjective because we answer by what we feel about ourselves. So if we believe we're an INFJ, for example, and we've read so much about it, we might answer those questions in correspondence to that. So take it with a grain of salt. But so once you have a first indication, most of the time you can narrow it down to, let's say, 4 types. So the most typical ones INFJs get confused with is ISTP, INFP, ENFP, INTJ, and ENFJ. So I think that's it. I think those are the most common ones. I don't think it ever happens, or very rarely, that you get a result ESTJ and then you're an INFJ or vice versa. So it helps you to kind of narrow it down. The next thing I would do, I would start reading all the descriptions on the types and then to compare them with one another. Because the first time I read the description about INFP, I thought, oh, this is so me. But I also felt that when I read the thing about INTJs, and I also felt that when I read something about empaths, and when I read something about highly sensitive people. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the closest one you are, because there are a lot of things when we read about INFPs or INTJs that we have in common with, and we focus on the things that are the same or that are similar. With INTJs, we have the strong intuition side. We also have that sensing part. With INFPs, we have a huge correlation when it comes to idealism. So you could always find things that correspond to how you feel. But if you read all of them, you will see that one of them resonates the most with you. So if you don't want to read all 16 of them, I understand that. That's why I'm saying narrow it down to, let's say, 4 or 5 and read those. And once you read them, there will be one that sticks out the most. That's going to happen in probably 80% of the cases. So if you're at this point and you're still not sure, start watching videos where there are comparisons about types. See, when I started getting interested in this topic, that was probably 2014. There were a lot of videos by DJ R&D. I don't think you'll find so many now. I think like maybe archived or somebody has uploaded them. But back then that was the thing. And he is an ESTP and he was talking talking about the comparison about the types, and I love that. I think that gave me the best explanation. So I try to do a lot of those from my perspective because I, as an INFJ, have of course a different perspective when I look at the types as an ESTP would. But that's exactly how I would approach it. I would watch videos on ENFJ versus INFJ, INFP versus INFJ, INTJ versus INFJ, and as I said, ISTP versus INFJ. That is the next step I would take because I could tell you things you could read somewhere else, like, okay, INFJs are very intuitive and they like to express themselves and they want harmony. Those things you read everywhere. But for most of us, this is not enough. Those informations don't give us the security that we want in order to feel like, is this me or is this not me? So take this step, narrow it down, use a system to find out what your type is. So once you've gotten to that point and you still don't know, let's say there are 2 types or 3 types you're still considering or you're not really sure of, you've maybe found out, okay, you're probably not an INTJ, but you're not sure if you're an INFP or ENFP or ENFJ. Let's say you have 2 or 3 that you're looking into. Then it's time to look into the functions. And it's the easiest way to look at the functions that one of the types doesn't have at all or has very strongly. So if you look, for example, INTJ versus INFJ, if you look at those types from perspective of what we have in common, it's going to be difficult. My brother is an INTJ, so I know a lot of the things that we do have in common, which is we think in an abstract way. We both care about extroverted sensing. So I find this extremely interesting. You see this with people with inferior extroverted sensing, especially my brother is now in his early 20s. You see how that urge and that excitement for this part of his life has gotten bigger, and that was the same way how it was with me. So I see that correlation, and if you look at it from that perspective, of course it's not going to be helpful. But the things that you know that the one type doesn't have and the other one definitely loves to do is TE. Extroverted thinking. INTJ, that's their second function, meaning that's their creative function. That's what they love. That's how they show up in the world in the best way they know. And for us INFJs, TE is non-existent. If you look at it from a socionics point of view, and I'll go into socionics a little bit later, it's a different system that goes more into depth, you recognize that from that perspective, we all have all functions, but for us, TE is the blind spot. It's the thing that we care about the least. We don't have any understanding for it. We're completely oblivious to it. INTJs, on the other hand, love it. So, extroverted thinking is about looking at things how they are already working, things that have worked, something that is reality. So think about how often you've been in situations where you've made conclusions where you felt like this is perfect, this makes so much sense, but there is nobody on the outside who could understand you. That's a perfect sign that you've made a conclusion through your introverted intuition and your introverted thinking. There is no TE involved, because in order to have TE involved, it would be something that other people could see as well. It would be something that is logic, that is based on reality. For example, let's say you would have great ideas about doing real estate businesses because you've seen X and Y do them and they have worked so greatly. It is something that is measurable, it's something that people can observe, and it's something that has been done before. And on top of everything, people value it. They give respect to that kind of thing. It's something that in society is a common harmony of logic. For us as INFJs, it's easy to compare with extroverted feeling because for us, extroverted feeling, it's like this common law of what everybody likes. We understand that, at least in our society, we have an understanding of what is acceptable behavior, as in harmony-wise, how you show respect to others, what makes the entire situation calm. That is a feeling we have that is so certain in us. And even if we know exactly how to disrupt it, the reason why we know how to disrupt it is because we are aware of that emotional atmosphere. That is FE. TE, on the other hand, is the equivalent from a logical standpoint. And I've been in so many situations where my logic was completely against everything that I've seen in the outside. And I'm sure if you're an INFJ, you will feel this too. If this doesn't resonate with you so much, if you feel like, well, no, most of the time I have logical conclusions that everybody resonates with, you're probably not an INFJ. That is a great indication for it. On the other hand, if you feel like your logic has always worked for you and it fits perfectly into your world and you can make it a reality, it's not like it doesn't work, but it's not something you could explain to other people right away, most people wouldn't get it, then it's probably the lack of TE. So you can remember this even if you don't look into socionic. You look at the third function and then you look at the opposite of it. So the blind spot for an INFP in this direction would be extroverted sensing, because their third function is introverted sensing. So the opposite in that sense, extroverted sensing. That is how I remembered it. Those are always the blind spots. So let's look at another very common misconception, and that is INFP versus INFJ. Specifically, when you're just starting out this personal development journey of finding out your personality type, this is probably one that gets confused with most because it sounds so similar. INFP, INFJ. Okay, so we're both introverted, we're both intuitives instead of sensors, we're both feelers, and then just one is a perceiver and the other is a judger. So if you look at it from that perspective, of course it might sound that we are very similar. But if you go a little bit deeper, you understand how different those personality types are. First off, they don't have one function in common. My best friend is an INFP, so I know that there is this common law between us. There's something that connects us. But in a lot of ways, our connection was much more interconnected in our 20s. There is a lot more love there and a lot more trust there now, but we're much more our own person. We have much more understood that we shouldn't project so much onto the other, and we found ourselves more and more. So, but specifically in that time, because there is such a connection between those two, you feel like, okay, they have so much in common. But in a lot of ways, it's the opposite. It's things we would want to have. It's things that we crave, but that we at some point will never be able to have to such an extent. INFPs, for example, their first function is introverted feeling. And I jump here a little bit. If you look into socionics, you will see that we as INFJs, we also have introverted feeling. It's not one of the 4 functions in MBTI, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a strong introverted feeling side. Introverted feeling tells you that you make your own decision about how you feel about yourself and others. It's not just about how you make others feel or what kind of emotions you project. It's your inner emotional state. And we all know that we as INFJs can go very deep. And this is not something that only goes into an I mode, it's also an emotional state. How many of us have been in love stories, specifically when we were younger, and we have lost ourselves completely in that? When we do that, most of the time we go way deep into FI as well. But here comes the difference. We don't have as much control over FI as an INFP. So if you have, let's say, somebody in your life and that person is an INFP, it gets so much easier to understand that. They're way more emotional than INFJs could ever be. So no matter what you think, because we as INFJs can be very passionate and we have those love stories in our mind that could be like all over the place and so intense, but the emotionality is never as controlled and as deep as you would see it with INFPs. They go way deeper and they can take so much more. Actually, it's the same way with ENFJs. Of course, they also don't have FI as their first function, but they have it as an ignoring function from a perspective of socionics. So just remember this. If you have feeling as your first function, doesn't matter if it's introverted or extroverted, you'll be able to experience a much bigger range of emotions, and you can take this. And if you as an INFJ who loves to absorb other people's emotion, who loves to live through others and to feel through others, which is, typical INFJ thing, you understand rather quickly that you will never be able to maintain that. I've tried that a couple of times, and every time I've gotten to a point where I said, I just can't take it. Because if you have as a first function a judging function, like, introverted feeling, which you might think, okay, INFP, it's a perceiver, and the INFJ is the judger. Well, that's how MBTI looks at it. But the truth is, the first function of an INFP is a judging function, and the first function of an INFJ is a perceiving function. So if you have somebody who has a first function, which is a judging function, you have much more control over that. You decide, how you feel about this. And I've seen this with INFPs. They've gone through such extreme emotional states, but the moment they decide that's it, they're out and they're emotionally out. They have much more control over this. For INFJs, it's not that easy. I've been in situations, and I've talked to a lot of you, and I've seen it in the last videos in the comments when I talked about this. If we obsess over something, sometimes it takes a very long time to get out of it because we cannot switch it off like this. Our NI is a perceiving function. It's an observing function. You see things, and changing that takes time, and we don't have so much control over our introverted feeling. In MBTI, it's not even visible, right? It exists in us, but we don't have that much power in it. You can also look at it from a perspective of the blind spot. Remember how I said the blind spot for INFPs would be extroverted sensing? Does that feel like something that you would have a problem with? Like I, as an INFJ, I love extroverted sensing. First off, I'm attracted to it. I'm attracted to people who have strong extroverted sensing in them. INFPs do not. Most of the time, they really dislike this kind of energy. Similar how INFPs, their inferior function is TE. I don't like to be around ESTJs and ENTJs so much. It always makes me sort of uncomfortable. So take these as little indications that will help you a lot. So look at the blind spots, look at what is the first function, what do others have more control over, and compare them. This will help you a lot to figure it out. Once you've figured it out, you'll see, oh, this is so obvious that this is my type. But when you're in the face of finding out, it's exactly information like this that will help you out. So, and the last tip that I can give you, if you want to understand all of it because you get obsessed over it like I did, I just loved learning everything about it. I loved learning about all the types, not just about understanding myself, but I also understood others better. It gave me such a foundation for everything that happened afterwards. I hope you remember that this is not the end, that once you understand all of it, it's time to grow because you're never gonna get satisfied by reading the same thing over and over again. This is not a validation of, oh, this is why I am this way and I just got to accept it. We can take everything that we learn about our personality type and use it to our advantage. But if you say now is the time, I want to go deeper into this, understand myself better, and therefore that will help me to move forward, look into Socionics. Socionics is a similar system to MBTI. You'll find a lot online about this topic. It's from Russia, so the translations aren't always great, but what you learn about it is really interesting and helps you to go deeper. And in a lot of ways, it corresponds with MBTI. I don't feel like they clash too much. I think they work together perfectly. So you can look into the Ryan dichotomies to see how does every type behave. It compares how the different types think, how they process things. It gives you information that you just cannot get from MBTI alone. So this is, if you're more interested in this topic, going into that will help you because there's always a correlation between the MBTI type and the Socionic types, right? You just got to understand. So in Socionics, INFJ is called INFP with a small p. It's because our first function is a perceiving function. But once you get familiar with it and you get excited about it, it can help you a lot in understanding everything. So I hope that helped you in your quest to understanding if you're an INFJ or not. I didn't want to give you the basic information that you can read everywhere. Remember, if you want to sign up for the bootcamp, it's a couple more days open. Or if you want to work with me privately, all the information you find below. And if you want to watch a couple more videos on this topic, then watch my playlist with all the comparisons of the types. Like always, guys, I wish you a wonderful day, a great week, and I talk to you next time. Bye.